Welcome to another episode of podcast number 8. This one is a special one since it is in English. Our guest is Jasper Manning from Institute of Molecular Genetics. Jasper did his master's at Johns Hopkins in US. Johns Hopkins is one of the world leading institute in science. After finishing master's, he moved to Czech Republic to enter the PhD program and successfully completing it, and then continue as a postdoc at Institute of Molecular Genetics. As a scientist, Jasper is an author of multiple papers. He is studying the molecular aspects of immunological signaling. As an observer, Jasper has a unique view. He can compare an American way and a Czech way of doing science and studying, how people interact and collaborate. I value him as a great friend of mine. He is always very open, as you will certainly discover in this interview. In this session, he dropped some serious truth bombs, so I'm most certain this will be an eye-opening one. Thank you for being here, and have a good one. Before we started, we already had a conversation, and I was thinking, I should have sit him here and let's talk to him and about these things, because that was exactly the thing that I want to talk about with you, because you are American and you part of your career you were in US.
That's
and
correct.
Now you are in Czech Republic.
Mm-hmm.
And you will definitely know your story better than I do, so I will ask you that in a second. But
Sure.
You have a very special position, a very special point of view, because you see students here and students in US, and you can compare. You can maybe compare the systems, maybe how people approach science, especially younger people before their postdoc careers.
Mm.
And when we are here in Czech Republic and we get the information from people at the faculty, let's say, or here at IMG from Czech people, we see their stories. But I think your perspective is richer than theirs. Not better, but richer in
Absolutely.
some different things.
It's definitely different.
But before I start, and before you will start with your story, you talk about these people who want to connect to you on LinkedIn, and I thought that you were up to a very important point, so that's why I stopped you before you say it. And so what was the story? You said that you met some people. You meet them here on the floors, on the hallways.
I meet a lot of people every day here,
Yeah.
and I find that people are quite. I'm not sure what the word is really. If it's intimidated, if they're unsure of me, but I'm definitely a curiosity item here. And I speak to everyone, whether they're a student or the director. I speak to everyone. And a lot of students are taken aback by it. They are not quite sure how to handle it. But I say hello to them almost every day. And most of them put their head down and run the opposite direction.
And do they say hi at least?
I would say 20% of them say hi. The other 80% just run. The 20% that does say hi, they just look down and they say hello, and they're very nervous. But later I will get a request on LinkedIn from these same people. And then nothing after that transpires. When I see them again in the corridor, again it's the same way. And I often wonder, well, I know now after living here for almost 16 years that the culture, the titles that people carry really mean something. And perhaps people see me in a higher role than they are, so they shouldn't acknowledge me. They shouldn't, as we would say, fraternize or speak with someone of a higher level.
So you think that's, let's say there is someone at your position but is Czech, that they will sort of interact with them in the same way?
That's a great question.
Do you think so?
I would say yes. However, those people generally have already studied abroad for some time. There are several people, several group leaders here who have been exposed to another side of interacting with people. For example, someone who's been in Canada or the US or Germany, the interaction would be different than it would be here with students. There's still a line between group leader and student, but it's a little bit softer. For example, when I was in the US and I was a research technician before I went on to work on my master's, the director of our institute allowed me to call him on a first name basis after meeting just once or twice, where I would never dream of doing that here. So there is culturally some interactions that are slightly different here than they are there. And I had to learn those things. I mean, I have one story about when I first came here. I went through a lot of trouble to get my master's recognized here in the Czech Republic. Since I have a master's, it's not the same as magister. Yeah. You know the whole story, but maybe some of your listeners don't. So I earned a master's in 2 years, but here the master's is part of the bachelor program, so it's 5 years, correct?
I think it's separated now. It might have been different, and maybe at some studies or faculties it is 5 years, but in my case it was 3 years bachelor and 2 years master. So
right.
there is a. But you have a master's after
4 years.
After 4 years. So you start without title and then you are master in 4 years.
That's right.
Okay.
So, well, actually you're a master in 2 years. You start without title. 4 years you earn your bachelor. Then 2 more years for magister or masters. So that was slightly different than what I was coming into the Czech system. And no one wanted to recognize it. So I was starting a PhD program here without a title of magister. So I went one day to, at the time, I don't remember the gentleman's name, but he was at the first faculty. And he needed to sign my paperwork to agree that I could start with this American master's degree. And he did not want to sign it. He told me, I will not sign it. And I said to him, I'm sorry for taking your time, interrupting your day, doctor. And he told me, I want to tell you a story right now. And that is, when you are here, learn the titles of the people that you're interacting with. You're not in America where you can just call someone doctor. And he proceeded to tell me his titles at that time and that I should use those titles. And I was very intimidated because in the US, back to the gentleman that I talked to who allowed me to call him by first name, when I called him doctor, that was more than sufficient. But here the title really matters. So perhaps students believe that when they interact with group leaders, with directors, that they must respect that title before they respect the person. And
I think that's how it is.
I would agree with you. And I had to learn that the hard way. But I think that it really draws a line between someone who's docent and someone who is a group leader, a postdoc, and you have these separate boxes that everyone is in, and you can't really interact because there's fear of stepping on someone's toes because of their title.
So even though a student knows the titles of a person, they still don't like, hello, good morning, Mr. Professor, hi, and leave. They just like stare down and pass the whole. But what's the difference between like real life interaction and LinkedIn interaction? Why they are not afraid to click on connect?
This is a great question. I don't understand it. Why would they take the opportunity to say, I've seen this person in the corridor. I'm afraid to speak to him or her. Send a request to connect and then be afraid to speak to them. It tells me that they want to interact, but they are afraid to interact. And as a student, if you go to a conference in France or you go to a conference in, Croatia, or the UK. People don't care. They want to know what you're working on, where you're from, and what they learn from you. No one cares about your title. In fact, most conferences I've been to, only your name is on the name card, right? There are no titles. Mm-hmm. So I think Czech students need to learn this. Do not connect or do not attempt to connect with someone if you're afraid to go down that road. Mm-hmm. No one's going to bite their head off. Mm-hmm. But because of the hierarchy, the system here, I think some of the students feel a little bit intimidated. And they shouldn't, at least with me. Mm-hmm. And hopefully some of them will hear this podcast and come and talk to me later and say, hey, I would really like to talk to you.
Yeah, I know
you.
Famous guy. Yeah. But I talked about this with Peter Svoboda. And he said that this is something, I don't know if it's certainly not just a Czech thing, but I think there are more states like this, that we have this differentiation between tikat and vikat, and therefore you have to recognize the titles. And this is basically not happening in US. And I'm still wondering, I don't see it as a good thing or bad thing or a good way or a bad way, but what we lack when we don't have this approach culturally, and what maybe on the other side what US people or scientists lack. We don't know that. I am interested in things that we don't see, that there is clearly something you don't understand, like as a human being. Certainly things like, let's say you are a scientist or a researcher, you don't know something about paintings, let's say. Mm-hmm. And as an example. But there are certainly things that you as a human being don't know about yourself as a human being. And if you are a part of a big cultural system, let's say like a nation, there is something you don't see about yourself. So maybe you can you imagine like what would it be like at the institute you work at in US? What would it be like if there was Vikani and Tikani? Can you imagine that?
Boy. Well, first, we should tell your audience that I was at Johns Hopkins School of Medicine. Mm-hmm. So for anyone who doesn't know about this institution, it's probably the foremost research center in the United States. It's always top 5, and it's one of the top in the world. So that attracts a lot of people from all over the world. Most of the postdocs you meet are going to be from Europe or Asia. So for everyone to tikat to vikat, it would just be crazy. So we have to learn to look at each other's cultural differences, but at the same time, immediately accept that person for who they are. And it can be difficult, but you will find that these are very, very intelligent people, and they're able to very quickly adjust. And the way they have to adjust is the American way. And it's sometimes, if we all laugh about it here in Europe, it's the very almost fake facade. Hey, how you doing? Everything's great today. But that's what you would have to learn in order to make it in the situation or in the system. I have to do the same thing here. When I came here, I had to adapt. And that's what, say, if you were at Hopkins or at Harvard, you would have to adapt in that same way.
So what's the benefit of this, let's say, US approach when there is I don't know if I can say it like this, but the facade you talk about, I see it as a downside because you have to be sort of fake, maybe.
Yeah.
But what's the benefit? Like, you know everyone, you can be honest to everyone, besides the facade.
I think the advantage of it first is that you have to remember everyone is having problems in their lives. No one cares that if the babysitter was late and you're coming into the lab late. People only want to know, what can you provide for them? This is the kind of American way. Can you bring to the laboratory what I need to get the data and get it done? So people are going to be somewhat fake. Hey, glad you're here. Inside they're thinking you should have been here 20 minutes ago. But it keeps the peace. The disadvantage of that is that you know that person is upset that you're late. And inside now you're nervous. So you may not be as efficient or maybe not able to think efficiently or work efficiently because you're thinking about that person being nice on the outside, but inside they're very angry. So there are advantages and disadvantages to it. And you learn, just like any system, you learn how to deal with it.
I think that despite the tikání and vykání, it's same here because
I would agree.
you can say like, you can come late to a meeting and everyone says, it's okay, but you know that they're angry and you don't need to be
it's human nature.
And maybe as you were talking, something came up to my mind, and I was thinking that this differentiation between like postdocs and PIs and PhD students and master students, it provides sort of a tribal separation. So
I would agree.
You know PhD student, you can guess or you know who is at a similar level as you, like who is PhD, who is doing their masters, who is postdoc, and it provides you with some. You are sort of a member of some group. You feel like you are with them, and they are against you.
Sure.
They want something from you. But does this is completely completely missing from the US?
No, it's the same.
It's
the same. You seek comfort, all of us, no matter what profession, you seek comfort around people that are like yourself. And to be in the same group, one thing that is slightly different in the US, and I often mention this to Czech students as well, is that you're only a PhD student for a very short time. It's usually 6 months to a year. Then after you've met, yes, meaning that once you've met the committee and you've passed the oral exam, you are a PhD candidate. And that they give you, or you earn the next level by passing the exam. You are now a candidate. And I tell many students here that they are highly trained within their first year. You're no longer a student. If you talk to someone such as yourself, who we should congratulate because you're on your way to becoming a postdoc, but when you were a PhD student, you were doing the same things and the same thinking as many postdocs. Because here we don't have the luxury to have so many postdocs in a laboratory. Most PhD students, or in my opinion, candidates, are doing a lot of research themselves. They get an idea from their group leader. Maybe they won't, but they get that from their group leader. And then they have to develop it. They have to find the techniques that are going to work. They have to go through the papers to find out if the proposed experiments would work or if they're suitable. And these are the things that many postdocs are doing in their first year, second year of postdocs. Because we don't have the luxury of having postdocs here, PhD candidates, in my opinion, are quite well trained. And for some of the people in the audience, they should know that I also did my PhD here. So I saw the difference between PhD in the US and PhD on hand here. And it was difficult for me initially because I had to learn that no one's going to tell me what to do. And if I talked to other students who didn't want to talk to me at the time because I was different, I was not part of their group. I was an outsider coming in. So I had those two things going against me already. And I had to learn quickly that the research that I had to learn to ask people, and sometimes I had to ask in Czech. When I first arrived, people wouldn't answer me if I spoke in English. So I had to learn how to survive here as a pseudo-native. And I respect that. I don't think I should have come here and speaking English all the time. I was happy that I could. But to be part of that group that you just astutely pointed out, I have to learn how to work within the group to get what I needed. And that's okay.
So comparison of PhD student here, or let's say PhD candidate. There is no PhD candidate, but let's say at the similar age, level of study, compared to US PhD candidate. It's basically different level.
I think a PhD candidate, yes, in the US, a PhD candidate is...
Because as I understood it, the things or the work PhD students do here is almost like postdocs work in US.
Yeah, the PhD student here is highly trained, and I can say at times they are self-trained. They get an idea, they develop the idea. And they go through the trials and tribulations of making the experiment work or to putting together a story. And that's a lot of pressure for someone who's never done science at this level. In the US, there are lots of postdocs who may or may not help you. A lot of them will help you, but you have that available to you. Here, and I think a lot of the people in your audience can relate to this, they have to do it on their own, and it can be very frustrating. Fortunately, when I came here, I had a project that I brought with me that I was able to develop, and we were able to publish it. I had some guidance, but most of it was something I already knew about, and we had already published in the US before I came. But many students start from scratch. I think we both can relate to that, starting at the bottom, grabbing information, not just from the text, from articles, manuscripts, but hopefully from someone in the group leader, or maybe a colleague at a conference, or it can be very difficult. This goes back to our first point, that you have to learn not to be so afraid to talk about something with someone. Yeah. You will find out that, that person knows that, or this person experienced that. And if the person doesn't know it, they will tell you, I haven't done this in a long time, but I know Professor so-and-so, they can help you. But the students have to get over their fear of asking someone. We all went through it. I went through it. Everyone goes through it. But those who are successful, they can turn to their colleague and they say, hey, can you help me out?
Yeah, I think that's...
so if I can add one point, the PhD student is a very good student, and they should pat themselves on the back because they do a lot of this themselves.
Okay, I wanted to ask another question, but I will add this one.
Okay.
How did it start? How have you become a scientist?
How did I become a scientist?
Yeah.
Well, it was a long road. I think when I was younger, I always knew I wanted to be a scientist. But I think many of us, when you watch some movie and at the beginning of the movie, they start off with a project, and at the end of the movie, they have the Nobel Prize, and you're wearing the white lab coat the whole time, and everything's going right. And I think we all have that image of being a scientist, and I had it too. But I guess in high school, and for your audience members, they should know that I finished high school in 1982, so it's been some time. I went straight on to university for 2 years in biology, and quite liked it. And I found it challenging, but life's plans are not always the way you want them to be. So I left. And I went on to the Army for 4 years, where I worked as a medical officer, or we call it medic. But I did that for 4 years, then returned back to biology. So I always knew I wanted to do biology. And after that, I went on to Hopkins and ended up coming here. And that's a whole nother story, maybe for another time. But I knew I wanted to do biology. But the challenges of understanding science, in my opinion, are not great. I mean, you have textbooks and you have a lot available to you. What the challenges were for me were understanding how A and B works together to get to C. I think a lot of us are technically sound. We can do what A tells us to do. And then we can do what B tells us to do. But how does the story develop where you're at the end of the story? That was hard.
Do you think there is a secret to understanding how to connect things?
I think I think you might be right. I think there isn't a secret, but there is a plan. And part of the plan is failure.
Oh.
That is, when you first start at A, and A may look great, but B may not work. And most of us will say, okay, it doesn't work at all. But a scientist, if you meet any scientist from any field, they know that they have to work on B because that's part of the story. And if B doesn't work, there's something that you are missing. And scientists are like detectives. They can look at B and figure out, well, maybe we should change this. Maybe we should change that without altering the direction of the experiment or the story. And that's the difficult part, because it sometimes seems like we're building a story, right? We're manipulating the story. We are, We're trying to make that puzzle piece fit, and I think you agree with me on that a little bit. It's not always correct to do that, but
I think that there is a conflict, not like between us, but in the conflict of a researcher, that there is something that you have to leave behind, which is like I would call it ego, but it's probably not it, but some pride maybe, to figure out stuff, that you have to be the one guy who figures these things out. But as you said, you are at point A and you think that B might be the answer or the way to go, and you realize it's not. So, and there then the struggle begins. Like normal, let's say, non-scientist would say, okay, so let's be. It might not be ideal, but it's okay, or it doesn't work at all. Let's throw A as well to the garbage.
Correct.
But you have to go back to the A and make a different move and go to other direction.
Certainly.
And that's hard because it's very it takes time. It means you wasted a lot of material and time. And
A can still be credible. You may not want to throw A away.
Yeah, exactly.
So
because you get before A there was something else. It doesn't have to be A. It can be D maybe or something.
Sure, certainly.
So, do you think that there are some defining moments in your career?
Oh yes. Wow. You mean defining moments of whether or not I wanted to continue, or defining moments of eureka?
That's a good question. No, I meant like that when you turn back, you think that I wouldn't be here if I didn't do this.
Oh, well, I think in life, this is a very deep question, because I think in life in general there are lots of things you can say. If I had gone left instead of going right, I would be somewhere else. I try not to look at life that way. I try to look at the path that I've chosen was the decision I made at that time, with the factors that I had. And I could have sat there for that moment for months thinking, should I go left or should I go right? But you make a choice. A colleague of mine told me many years ago, you can think about your next postdoc. You can call the PI of that group. You can talk to everyone in the laboratory. You can look at what city it's going to be located in, everything about it. But once you get there, it's your path. And some people say, oh, I went to Ireland and I was in Glasgow and it just didn't work out. Well, maybe it didn't work out because you didn't go down the path that you wanted to go down. Maybe some people go and they say, I'm intimidated by this, or this is too difficult, or it's too far away from home. Many of us do this. The thing is just to go down the road. Just go. Whether it's left or right, go down the road. And there's always going to be forks off that road. If anyone ever tells you that they went down this road and they were heading to a PhD and at the end they got PhD and everything was fine, it's a complete and utter lie. Because life is as such that we have to go left when we need to go right. So defining moments, there are many. And I'm not sure I want to bore your audience with my defining moments, but...
You never bored me, so I think you will never bore anyone else.
Well, this is very nice of you to say, but I think, of course, after we leave this nice conversation, I will think of something I will say. I think this was more of a defining moment. But I think the biggest moment was my defense. Because the defense here was completely different than what the defense is in the U.S.
Okay.
In the U.S., you defend with your committee. And your committee they're with you the entire time you're a PhD student or candidate. They are encouraging you because you are doing a lot of the work that has been suggested by them. They're ideas that they have helped you get down the road. Where the committee here is people who are unknown to you, maybe. And of course, they didn't know me because I didn't come through the system here. I didn't start as a bachelor and get the magister. So they didn't know my work. They didn't know me. They didn't know my personality. I had to go in there and somehow impress them. And it was very difficult for me. So to finish that was a milestone. I was not so proud of my finishing because it was difficult. But I knew that I wanted to continue onward to see if I could make it through something so difficult. Culturally, I think scientifically it was fine. I had a lot of support in the lab. I had some success. I was able to publish. But culturally, it was difficult. And I was exhausted at the end. So that was a big milestone. Then there were others down the road that we can talk about later. But that was the biggest one, earning a PhD in a foreign country. And I've had students come to me and they say, I want to go to Switzerland or I want to go to Belgium and do my PhD. Do you suggest I do that? And I always tell them no. It's easier to do a PhD or magister or bachelor for that matter in the system that you know. Because it's already going to be, it's not going to be so difficult, but it will be a challenging process. So if you know the process, it makes it that much easier, a little bit easier to complete it. As an outsider coming in, it can be a little bit intimidating. So that's one milestone, I think.
So you're facing something that you sort of know, but still you have an idea what will happen, but still there is the process that you have to go through.
Yeah. And that process is going to change. I'm sure in your career already, you thought you were going to start with something, and you end up 4 years later, and you look at it and you say, well, where did this go? It's the left or the right, or you just take it.
It's a good. Now I get an idea to ask, but it's a completely different topic. But you ask yourself a great question. Whether you wanted to quit or... I know that, of course, there's a lot of stress in science. And sometimes you feel like, things don't work. And,
Sure.
But you said that you wanted to be a scientist from early age. So was there a moment where you felt like, I'm done. I'm going to be a car driver or something?
No, there was never that moment. I've always enjoyed getting up, going to the laboratory, meeting the people. That always sets my mood. If I come in and I see people in the corridor, I'm going to if someone had told me 20 years ago I would be doing this sort of work, I would have laughed. I would have said, it's a pipe dream, we say. But I've always looked at science as something that makes me feel not alive, but it stimulates my mind. Always. If I talk to someone or if I go to a conference and I hear about what they're talking about, it's quite nice. Even when I went to your lecture, it stimulated something that I had encountered in the past.
That's interesting, because you said that you are looking forward to go to work, to do experiments and meet people. For some reason, I think that people I know, not you but other people, they wouldn't mention people in their work. Maybe including myself. When you would ask me, what are you going to do in work? I would say, this experiment, finish this, destroy this, and there is no space for people. It's almost like that you are alone in the lab. Of course, you talk to them, but in a very shallow way. That how are you? What you're doing? It's never really deep. But what I found, and maybe just because of my personality, I don't know, that there is very few people who have time to really go deep in your problems. Not necessarily take your problems as theirs, but really go deep and thinking, okay, so this didn't work, or what do you think about this, and do you have any idea? Of course, they don't have to understand your topic completely, but there are some general principles in science in general, like what to do when this doesn't work, and what experiments, and they have more experience, obviously. But you said that you are looking forward to meet the people, so I think that we basically work too much. That there is the interaction, and obviously that's not because of other people, that's because we don't seek it.
That's correct.
In the institute or at the faculty, anywhere, that we just go there to do the work and then leave.
But you're there 8+ hours a day with the same people. Aren't you the slightest bit curious about who that person is? Or, sometimes you see a person at the bench and they're struggling. They're trying to figure something out, and you walk by them, and you as a human, you want to look at that person and say, hey, can I help you? Maybe that's missing here because everyone is trying to get to the end of their project, which is part of the PhD experience. I understand that. But along the road, there are people, or should I just say they are people. They have families, they have partners, their car broke down, their mother is sick. And to talk to a person about something other than work really helps a person. It gets your endorphins going. Or if you went skiing and you jumped off a big cliff and you want to tell somebody about that. I landed one ski and I was feeling great. Not to be able to share those things. It's kind of, you're living an empty life. So when I come to work, I see people sitting there and I'm thinking, who is that person inside? But you have an interesting point, because I spoke to a student about a month ago, and I told him, I said, I really don't know who you are.
That's a great conversation starter.
Yeah, the icebreaker. I told him, I've been working with you for 3 years. I know nothing about you. And his reply was, yes, you know me. You see me every day. You know I'm working on this project. Bang. That's what you've just said. And
people become their projects.
Yeah, exactly. Well said. And I said, but who are you? He had told me that he had to rehabilitate his apartment. And it was an apartment that was given to him. It wasn't in great shape, but he improved it over a year's time. And I like to do a lot of that stuff as well. And I was really shocked. I said, we have something in common. I said, this is what it means to know who the person is that you're working with. Not whether or not the antibody that you bought is working or not, and you spent 15,000 crowns on it. Everyone talks about that. But who is the person behind the pipette? You know,
what drives you to ask this question?
I think it's my culture. My family, as you can tell, pretty talkative family. My mother's very talkative. My father could talk to anyone on the street.
But you are not just talking. You are really asking the essential question, like, who is this person? What do you do? What did you... It's not like talking about something third person, like, he did this, and this guy is something, and this political thing, and this scientist, and this paper. No, it's about them.
It's true. It's true. You're right. But remember, I've been working with them for a while. It would be quite odd if after 3 days I asked them these sort of questions. You would say, even I would say, hold on, back up. I mean, I've worked with them. I see them, and I see how they, over months, and they slowly start to ask them. When I think of something, I ask them. But of course, it would be quite strange. And I know people who do it. First day, they want to be your friend, and they want to go down to the local pub and drink with you and tell you their whole life story. But I think if you're working with a person over time, they become your family. You are with them 8+ hours a day.
Yeah.
So
I think they become your family,
more extended,
even though you don't talk to them.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
this is the family you make, basically.
That's right.
And if you don't talk to them, they are like,
Yeah.
very...
I don't expect them to
Stay
tell
right
me
from it.
everything,
Yeah.
but I think they will welcome it. You're sitting in the lab and it's 10 o'clock at night, and I'm sure many people can relate to it. You're doing some dose response experiment and you're sitting with someone. It happened to me a couple of years ago. A student turned to me and she started telling me something that had happened to her that was bothering her. And at the end, we discussed it, and she just said, I just really needed to talk about it. And that developed to the next stage, and to the next stage. And now we're quite good friends. But this is a person I never thought would do this. She was very closed, but she was just protecting herself, as we all do. But you're working together in the lab, late. You're going to reach out. It's human nature. And it's okay to do it, I think.
I think that this requires to expose your vulnerability.
Yeah. Yes, it does.
And,
You don't have to.
And in science, since you fail so much as a scientist, it feels, I don't know, that there is a lot of weak spots, basically, because you fail almost all the time.
Yeah.
So you feel like a failure, almost. But it's not true. I mean, it's the experiment. Sometimes things don't work. It's you do the experiment, but you are not the experiment, maybe.
Well said. I agree.
Of course, you are part of the experiment, but that's the problem, I think. Maybe it's not the problem. That's just how it works. That's the system. That we are in research, especially. I mean, it's also in applied, but in terms of primary research or basic research or fundamental research, we are too focused on the end result, which is I understand. It's completely understandable in applied research because you need to make something. You need to make some diagnostic tool, maybe.
Sure.
But in primary research, I think there should be more space for growth and failure. The focus on the result is too strong, and we all want to get there. Especially when you write the grant application and you have to say what you will do in 3 years and how the results will look like.
Sure.
Yes, you have to promise some stuff so you get the money, but there should be some, like free space for good questions and vulnerability, like to be able to say, okay, I was wrong. This is not the way we should have should have taken. Maybe we will go some different path. And I think that this should be allowed to at least to say and be evaluated. If this really was such a mistake that they have to go completely different path after 3 years of research, therefore they don't have results. And maybe this is to this topic, but I wouldn't be so surprised if, in case that this stress on results would make some people do mistakes that,
of course,
that they don't recognize or admit.
Well, this is why we meaning members of the science community, we develop a thick skin, because we have to understand, as you astutely pointed out, time is money. So you have to conduct an experiment, get the results, write the grant, publish a paper, write the grant, so that you can get the money to continue. But you don't have that free space to make a mistake and say, oh, well, as you've said, oh, let's go another direction. You've got to, we like to have this saying, put a round peg into a square hole. You're going to make it fit. You're going to force it in there so that you can get to the end, so that you can get more money to take care of the people in your laboratory, to get funding. So you're right. But I understand from the point of view that you cannot allow people to, it's not like in the 1890s where you had a couple of laboratories and they were just doing it for the sake of knowledge. The competition for funding is very high. I don't have to go through all of this. Everyone understands this. So you have brought up a dilemma. Do we allow these bright young minds to go off on their own, to try something that may not work, or do we stick with something that we see is not going to work, but we make it work? We make that story a nice, pretty story so that we can get the funding, so that we can maybe improve it later. And it's a challenging thing. And all of us will experience this, if we haven't already, in some time in our career, and it will almost break you. I think about a lot of the group leaders, they're constantly writing grants here, constantly. They can't feed their students or their postdocs ideas that they have because they're constantly trying to get money so that they can get a little bit further down the road. Maybe they went ahead and they turned right, and it wasn't the best turn, but they have to continue down that road. They don't have the luxury of stopping and turn around and saying, let's go back and try this way, because funding is so crucial. And this is something that we will always see. And people, as long as we have governments that are going to put funding into armies and wars, we're not going to have funding for the sake of humanity, to do research to help the common man. I mean, it's always going to be get a quick story so that we can get funding, so that we can try to do something better later. But we never get to do something better later. Not every discipline, but most disciplines. Yeah, it's definitely not anything that's very nice to think about, is it?
I think that since science it's like with the forks that you mentioned, that you don't know what would be your life now if you didn't take this and take this turn. So it's similar in a bigger picture with science, that fundamental research took this fork to accept this system. You get money for your results, for a paper, and as you said, that the people, what they ask is what to do to get money, which is completely big, turn from the original idea that I thought that the science would have, like
All of us.
What to do to understand this? What to do to elucidate this? What to do to reveal something we don't know? Because there is this one question behind, which is, do we have money for it? Will we get money after we publish this?
That's right.
And I think that we will never know where we would be if we said, okay, we want more money. We need more money for this. But we will always go to reveal stuff, to understand stuff, to... If we don't have something after 5 years, that's because, it takes more time than this. If we reduce ourselves to 4-year limits, to 5-year limits, there might be a lot of things that we will never understand.
Absolutely.
That we might have if this system wouldn't be applied to this type of research. I don't want to degrade it, to say that this is wrong. No, of course not.
Of course not.
It provided a lot of money, and a lot of the understanding is useful, obviously. But there are still some ways. There are still some areas where the money are fueled, but it didn't move for tens of years, or maybe they are going wrong direction.
Yeah.
And maybe they should ask not how to get more money, but are we on the right path? Are we understanding the things we need to understand? Maybe.
Well, I think you're right, but systems are flawed. Humans are flawed, and so we can only work on it when the next group of new, young, innovative scientists take the time and try to change it. But usually they are so busy, they step into the roles of the people who are now leaving science. They don't have time to change how the system works. And then when they do, or they attempt to, then there are people who complain. There's infighting and outfighting, and it's difficult to change any system in probably most fields, I would imagine. In science, definitely, because we know this, and we're learning how it works, but we are not infallible.
You said nicely that people are flawed, but yet they are trying to understand nature, which is in its nature probably, not as flawed as we are.
That's a great point.
So maybe there are flaws in our understanding.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
But still, the scientific way is the most, profound way, as far as we know. But since humans do it, there will be flaws as well. So maybe we are overlooking something that we...
I would imagine we're overlooking many things.
Okay, so I'm not providing any smart.
No, I think
here.
I think many years ago, and you may remember Professor Svoboda, who died a couple of years ago. He was. I had the opportunity to talk with him on many occasions, and this gentleman was brilliant. And if he had taken a certain road in 1968, 69, he would be in a different level of science. But he chose to stay here at that time. But he told me once that, it's important not to try to be an excellent scientist or the best scientist, but just try to be a good scientist, just to understand where you are. Because when you look outside of good, you're influenced by different opinions, probably coming from within yourself, and you're trying to influence other opinions. How great I am, I thought of this. He said, just try to be a good scientist. That's all you need to do. And I remember wondering, why was he telling me this? Was he telling me this for myself, or was he telling me this for himself? Of course, I was too afraid to ask him why. But I respected the fact that he even told me this. Because someone of his stature, he has the whole concept of uncle genes. I mean, this gentleman was just brilliant. I miss him. I miss him a lot.
Unfortunately, I never talked to him, but I heard stories with similar vibe, that he was a very special person.
He really was.
Jasper, what is science for you?
What is science?
What does it mean?
I think science for me, it's like a detective series. You have some hypothesis. You have this question. And I think most scientists have this innately from kids, I talked to a colleague of mine, and she told me that when she was a small girl, she was in the soil looking at worms and wondering how they got there. So for me, science is a detective story. How did those worms get there? Where are they going to be tomorrow? What do they do in that soil? How do they survive better in that soil? If I take them out, what is the next question? How do they survive? Do they survive better? And I think since we're basic scientists, I sometimes forget that in this day and age we have to have translational biology. We have to be able to take those basic ideas and apply them to how it's going to help mankind. But science for me is the basic remnants or the basic foundation of what is happening, what we see. And I still thrive on that, I think. Sometimes I'm not very good with translational biology, even though my background in epigenetics stems from translational biology. But basic science is what science is for me. What are the building blocks and how do they work?
Do you think that this innate desire we talked about, do you think that, what is it? Like, what do, let's say that I don't know, why would, it's a very metaphysical question. Why would someone would to understand the worms in the soil and someone would not?
We're all wired differently. I was just looking at something on some search engine, and it was some singer was writing her story, her, autobiography, I guess. And in that, she was saying that she had sang in this hall, and she always wanted to sing here and sing there. But that made her feel alive. That made her click. I think if you told her about the worms in the soil, her eyes would roll into her back of her head, and she would be ready to sleep. I think, again, it's innate. It's people that are in this building and other buildings across the country and across the world have buildings like this, have this desire to understand something. Immunology, biochemistry, physics. People want to... I don't know if it's tangible what you can touch to say, this makes this person a scientist, this makes this person a singer. We're all wired a certain way. And I think about this often, but I usually let it go because you're never going to convince the singer that biology is important. You may be able to tell him or her that, we do this to help people, to understand how things work, but they're never going to say, have a eureka moment. Hurrah, I got it. They're not going to have that. Where you and I might look at it and we say, hey, not only do we understand, we start building an experiment around it or have some conference to get other people to sit down and discuss it. This is how we think. So I think it's just how we're wired. And it will always be this way, I think, in my opinion.
Do you ever think about a life that everything is determined?
That's an excellent question. I used to think of it that way. But as I've gotten older, I've had to adjust so many times. Meaning, again, the analogy of the fork in the road. When I was younger, I thought that I would be, at the time, genetic engineering was the term that everyone was using. This was in the early 80s. And I thought that's what I will be doing. And then they changed the terminology, and they were able to, come up with PCR, and all sorts of things kept developing and changing. And now we're at the point where we're doing CRISPR, and just, the things that we've done in the last 40, 50 years have been just like clockwork, because minds are just innovative. So I don't look at life being determined anymore. I think that I can try to drive the bus down a certain road, but there's going to be some bump. I'm going to get a flat tire. I'm going to have to turn right. I'm going to have to pick someone up. I'm going to have to drop someone off. That I have no idea who I'm going to meet. We met the same way. I saw you many times. We chatted, and that was it. I mean, we got to learn who each other were, but that was definitely not predetermined. And I'm glad that life is not predetermined. I used to believe it, but I want to experience something. If I may add, one night I was walking home, and there was a cab driver standing on the side of the road, smoking a cigarette. And he looked at me, and he asked me, "Oh, you had a late night at work?" And I said to him, "Yeah, I'm just going home." He said, "It's kind of late." And I said, "Do you mind if I stop and chat with you?" He said, "No." We just started talking. And it wasn't anything deep. It was just two people connecting. I mean, it was just vague. In the middle of Prague Street, 9 o'clock at night. It might have been later. And afterwards, I thanked him and went on. And, my Czech is not that strong, but we had a nice conversation. He apparently wanted to chat for a while. We talked for about 20 minutes. Definitely was not predetermined. And that really influenced me. That one, he would see me and just want to know who I am at that moment. What was I doing? How is life treating me? Is everything okay with you? It was one of the coolest things I've ever experienced. And this has happened to me several times. If you could be on my shoulder every day, you would see so many strange things that would happen. It's just...
You told me about a couple of these things, that strange things that happen to you. And sometimes I feel after we occasionally meet, and you tell me some of your story, how you meet someone at the bus stop or anything, I feel like he's living in a different country. I don't know these people. Where are they? When I'm on the bus stop or when I go by cafe or something. Maybe that's. Do you think it's you, or you just meet these people?
I think it's me. I'm exotic. I'm different than what you would see walking down the street of Prague. The population here of blacks is quite low, and there is somewhat of a difference of how I look from other blacks. So people are curious. And, sometimes people see me often, the same time, and they realize that I live in that community. So they become even more curious. One example, there was an older woman I used to see every day. And she walked past me, never said anything. And then one day she asked me if I knew where some street was. I mean, this was after maybe a year and a half. And I thought, that's odd that she asked me that. But I think she was just curious because she saw that I lived in that area. And I told her, I think it was over there. She says, oh, yes. But it had nothing to do with the street. She was like the taxi driver. She just wanted to connect with something that was different. I would say she was in her 60s. So she didn't experience someone like myself that was different than what she had known. And again, I've had other experiences like that. I welcome these experiences.
Does this happen in the US as well?
I think Americans are we're quite forward. We're very outward. Yeah, it happens.
And do you think there is a genuine care behind these questions?
I think it's curiosity. Except for the case with the taxi driver. That was clearly something odd. You know, maybe the planets were aligned at that moment that we were supposed to.
Maybe they were.
But I think people are curious and people are living in their bubbles. And sometimes you just run into a person who's just frustrated being in that bubble. You just happen to cross their path when they're ready to just say something to someone. And I think it's, again, that goes back to whether or not that's determined or not. I think it's not. It's just, as they say, two ships passing in the night. You don't know what's going to happen.
Maybe it's part of the plan. Maybe it's not.
Well, that's a nice retort. It's true.
I still wonder about this. There was one point when I was in the bed thinking, and there was a genuine moment when I just said to myself in the middle of the night that, okay, everything is determined. And I felt like God peace or something. Maybe it was a relief that I don't have to be put a lot of pressure on myself, that everything will be okay. I don't know, but at that very moment I felt that that might be it. But I still question it. This is something. Maybe this is something I do maybe way too much, that I question too much things, especially about myself. Like I want to do this. Do I really want to do it?
But I think this is normal.
I feel like I like it. Yeah. Do I really like it? This is maybe too much question for myself. Do you think it's okay?
I think it is okay. I think you should constantly question and improve yourself. I mean, I was thinking about it as I was coming here today. Who am I going to be tomorrow?
You were thinking this when you were coming here?
Yes. Wow. Because I don't want to be the person who just thinks that, okay, my life is finished. It's stopped. I'm done. So what can I find tomorrow? And I was thinking about meeting you here today and talking. You know, this is an opportunity to talk with someone that I speak with all the time, to let our brains just open up and just discuss things. Where maybe I would have said, oh, you know, I'm a little bit nervous about it, or we haven't spoken in a long time. I could have found some excuse. But then who would I be? Who would I be tomorrow? Tomorrow I'm going to be different than I am today because we had this conversation. There's always something that can influence you positively or negatively the next day, and it's going to change you. And I would like for PhD students to remember this. The work is difficult. Sometimes understanding what your PI wants is difficult. But at the end of the day, and I know that's such a cliche to say, but at the end of the day, you are different, and tomorrow, that's going to help you get through tomorrow. And it's going to help you get through the next day. Try to be open to something. Try to expose yourself to something that makes you uncomfortable or makes you knowledgeable. Just expose yourself.
I think that it's a great point, but it needs one thing, and that is asking yourself, this went wrong this day, I will have to adjust some things tomorrow. If you don't do it, you will just repeat
I agree.
your mistakes.
That's right.
So you need time, you basically need time for yourself, for your mind, to reevaluate the things you did or you thinking about doing. You just can't go through every day thinking I will do this without really looking back or thinking about this. And I think that one thing that really helps to do this is the conversation with people.
I agree.
As you said, that you go to work to do the experiments and talk to people. It's basically two sides of the same thing. But if you suppress one thing and you only talk to people or only do the experiments, then there is a chance that you fail again with the same in the same
Sure.
experiment.
Sure. And I think you would see that if a lot of the students here had the opportunity to speak to their group leaders here on that level, they will find that their group leaders also try to, they are human and they don't want to repeat the same mistakes as well. Of course, they may think about it differently than you, but they're human and they're trying to improve. And they also have their own set of problems, their whole own set of issues that they're trying to resolve while doing good science. And there's that word again, that key word, good science. You know, not submitting papers to Nature all the time, but just doing good science. But life is a struggle. So you have to, as you said, reevaluate. At the end of the day, okay, maybe give yourself some type of grading. On a scale of 10, I did 7 today. Tomorrow I'm going to try to do 7.3. I'm being
That's
silly,
but that's a good start.
Yeah, but yeah, it's a good start, you know. Or, you know, I have days where I say, you know, man, I really stunk up that day. But then I reassess it and I say, it wasn't as bad as I made it out to be. You know, I didn't burn down the laboratory, or I didn't kick the dog that ran in front of me by mistake or something. I didn't make a major mistake. I'm just hard on myself. And I think everyone is. But as you said, okay, reevaluate it. Don't be so hard on yourself. And you will see tomorrow you will develop. And you also said that you should think about it. You should think about it. And I think sometimes we rely on those people around us to give us the answers to what went wrong. And
wow, that's a good one.
That's a problem. You should definitely think about it yourself, because first, the person who you're talking to or you want to talk to will have a different opinion because they didn't experience what you experienced that day. They will experience it, but at another time. So they will have a different feeling at that moment. Yes, it's okay for them to be a sounding board and to hear what you had to say. It's also therapy for yourself. But try to answer the question yourself first.
But you ask them to understand yourself. So that's a very interesting point. So you don't ask question to get the answer, but to get an opinion.
Absolutely.
From which you might understand yourself.
Yeah.
But you are the only person that can understand yourself, who
That's right.
provides the answers, including your personality and maybe your experiments as well.
Exactly. Yeah, we should talk to ourselves. Sometimes we talk to ourselves too much, but at least speaking for myself. But I think as long as you're going down that road, again, you made that choice, go down that road, take it as far as you can, and you will have to turn left or right, or I don't want to say go backwards because that's rare, but you might have to. But for the most part, just take another direction. Assess who you are, assess what happened. I have a colleague who, very hard worker, but a lot of times they will see the experiment before the end of the experiment comes. They already have an idea of how it should end up. And I think that's a mistake. I think, yes, you should have some hypothesis, but they have a result at the end. And they're banging their head against the wall. It's 3 o'clock today, and at 5 o'clock I should have the result, and it should be that result. And it would be great to have that result. Yes, we all say that, but just let it flow. And this person tears themselves up inside. Oh, I didn't do this right. This may not work because I may not get the result. And I tell them sometimes, just let it flow. Let it go. Tomorrow's another day. You can reassess tomorrow. But right now, let that go. Assess it tomorrow.
They are becoming too much. They are becoming their project, basically. Mm-hmm. They are too much the part of the experiment.
Well said. I agree with you.
Which might be wrong, because the experiment should be, influenced as little as possible by you. You should just perform it, but not really become part of it.
That's right.
This should be like this, because it, may eventually lead to some wrong things. So. How do you you talked about hardworking people. It's a really implicative question to ask. What do you think about them? But they are hardworking, and they usually meet hardworking people, so they all are hardworking. But they have a little time, or from the perspective I see hardworking people. They have very little time to talk to others. So if they could stop for a second and talk to you, what would you tell them? I don't want to imply that this it's wrong to be hardworking. I don't think it's a one way that certainly provides some benefits and certainly provides some limits. So what would you point at?
Well, this is a question that I think of, and I've experienced often. First thing I always say is that I thank them for stopping and taking the time to talk to me, because there must have been something in their mind that wanted to slow down. They're hardworking, but they stop and they talk to me. They take time away from that important thing to talk to me. So I always thank them for that. So I can see you're working hard, and you took time to stop from. We've run on the stairs, but you always stop and talk. So that says there's some connection. That's some reason you want to talk to me. Second thing I would say to them is, how are you doing? Not with the experiment, or I want to know, is your cat okay? Is your mother okay?
What you doing? I'm working. What you doing tomorrow? I'm working.
Exactly.
Who are you?
Who are you? I know we're all working hard, especially the students trying to get that data or to finish that experiment. But if they're going to take the time out to stop and chat with me, let's talk about something that will help them, or not help them, will give them insight to, or make them feel a little bit better about themselves when they return to work. Because none of us are robots, right? We need something. Some people like to talk about football. Some people like to talk about the opera that they saw the previous night. Something that they really is endearing to them. And if you talk to them about that and you find out you have the same connection, they go back to work feeling a little bit more positive maybe, or feeling more energized. If I can help them with that, then I'm quite happy. It happens to me all the time. Someone will ask me, oh, I saw you at the fitness center. Do you go often? I like that. I like doing it. Or talking about how can I get this colleague and I were talking about automobiles and old cars and that sort of thing. I completely forgot about what I was doing that day because I like talking about those things. So it energized me, and I ended up having a pretty successful day at the bench because of that sort of thing. So I would thank them first. That's what I would do. So thanks for coming over and chatting with me.
I think that at some point, being a hard worker, like really almost ill-like person, like really work all the time, that there is a reason for it, that you have to experience it to feel like, because to be like to lose yourself and to be completely in work, to appreciate other things later on after you are done with the hard work. I see it from my perspective, because if there was someone just like me and who started right now, and I would see him, I would feel like, okay, so he's probably a hard worker. He's there all the time. He's doing experiments. But I would try to talk to him, but I would not try to convince him to do it other way. So just experience it, do it your way, because I feel like that later on you will try to connect with people more.
But I wonder if students really, I think they are afraid. They are hardworking because they're afraid to stop and connect. Because other students look at each other and they say, oh, he's got all these results. He looks good. He knows this. He knows that, or she knows this. And if I'm not working hard, I'm not going to be as successful as that person. I think we all concoct an image of these people who are hardworking. Maybe the person is hardworking because what they're doing is not working. Maybe they're just repeating it.
Making the same mistakes.
Yeah, back to that again.
Maybe they need to talk to someone.
Absolutely.
Because
so this is my point.
I know stories of people that come to work, do their thing, talk to people, and they have great results. It almost feel like that everything is meant to be discovered by them. And then there are people who do experiments all day long, all weekend, nothing.
Yeah. Yes.
Or you do 4 experiments a day and 1 goes okay. So I don't think there is a good way or a bad way. I think there is just the way you experience them.
You know, there are so many variables.
Yeah.
And if I was doing 4 experiments and only 1 experiment worked during the day, I would not do 4 experiments, because that's just going to tear down your psyche. There is clearly, there's so many things that can be involved. Could be a fatigue. It could be the setup of the experiment. It could be reagents. It could be just a general mistake. We are human. So cut down the number of experiments to half and see if you can get 2 of them to work.
Yeah.
And I have done this in my career, and I saw results immediately. Second thing I had to do, and my group leader has told me this, even now, you know, sometimes you need to ask. You need to say something. You can't keep making that mistake, getting these poor results, and then have nothing. You're doing it over and over again. Again, it's damaging your psyche. You don't feel good. You don't feel competent or capable. He told me, you need to ask. And I thought, I've been doing this a long time. But then I started thinking, yes, you've also been making this mistake for a long time. So there's some value in asking. So cut down the experiments. Don't bang your head against a wall. And again, this has been the common theme of what we've been talking about tonight. Ask. You know, the people in my laboratory, all of them, most of them now have finished and successfully finished their PhD. But when they were students, I wasn't afraid to ask them something. Well, maybe I was uncomfortable because I didn't know what the topic was and I had to ask. But I'm not afraid to ask them so that I can get down the road. I want that result.
Yes, I think it's a great point, you just you should not be afraid to ask, because that's you're human, everyone is flawed, and you make mistakes, and you have to admit it that you are doing a mistake, which is it hurts your pride, it hurts your ego.
Sure.
And you are trying to discover nature, which is probably close to perfect, if not perfect. So,
and we don't have the tools to even determine a lot of the things that we're doing. What we do have is quite incredible, but we're looking at a small piece of system. We're looking at one protein, one gene. That's influenced by so many other variables within the cell. Environmental conditions as well. So, and I don't think a lot of students learn this until later. Again, they learn it through their own trial and error. Mm-hmm. Someone doesn't have time to tell them that, like Professor Svoboda told me, just be good. Don't try to do everything that you can to make this a perfect experiment. And if students learn this, if I had learned this when I was younger, I think I would have... I was around people that were quite good. All of them have gone on to be very successful. But they allowed me to think and be good as them. They weren't ever putting me down saying, oh, you shouldn't think of this and you shouldn't think of that. Unless, of course, it was going to take me down a rabbit hole. I think that students need to learn that, as you have said, they're flawed. Your thinking sometimes is, for a second, you may do something, you may make a wrong calculation or use the wrong antibody or whatever you're doing. To slow down, ask someone, reevaluate. These words keep coming up in our conversation, and this is only going to help you become better. It's going to help you as you get down the road, farther down the road. Because when you become a postdoc, people don't realize once you become a postdoc, you're on your own. You are now supposed to have the knowledge to drive experiments independently as an individual. Still working within the team, but you should be able to drive it. And this is hard. It's very hard to do. When I was a PhD student, I was quite successful. But my first postdoc, and my second postdoc for that matter, I had to work pretty hard just to get some data. And even now, there are days that I work hard, and at the end I have to reevaluate, reassess. Whereas as a student, things just happen to fall into place. I got lucky. And as you said, it's a nature. Nature is the system. Nature knows the system better than we do. So students should know this, and they shouldn't, of course you should be hard on yourself and work hard, but just realize that not everything is going to work just because Honza over here did it and it worked every single time. Your system may be completely different. Mm-hmm. Or it can be something as simple as the reagent you're using. You don't know. Mm-hmm. And going home feeling sorry for yourself because it didn't work. Okay, you can feel a little bit badly about it, but don't get down on yourself.
Well, but where is the point where a person should give up? Where a scientist should give up?
I think that's all individual. Mm. I think anyone who starts a PhD...
And should they give up?
No, should never give up. One student told me once, I'm ready to finish, and things weren't working well, and I started to ask the student, what other things have you been doing that have given you some results? And over time, we started chatting, and they discovered that hey, I have accumulated something that will eventually be in the paper. And I said, that's very nice. But really, who cares about the paper? Look at the effort that you have put in over this time. Yeah. And you want to just stop now?
You are more than a paper.
Yes, you are. Back to that again.
Project.
Yes, you are. And I said, you have worked for this. At the end, you have earned this title that is so important. But not that it's important, but that you completed it. You did it. Nobody can take this away from you. So those of you who are out there, you're starting this. It's going to be difficult. But if everything was easy, no one would do it. So keep going down the road. Don't stop. And I know it sounds like this sunny, very happy kind of fake way of thinking, but just think about the fact that you've started something and you've put this blood, sweat, and tears into it. And then to just say, these experiments don't work anymore, I'm going to quit. It would be just ridiculous, I think, and hurting yourself.
Not every lab is so blessed to have you. Yeah, in their lines, but
I appreciate it.
I think that there are certainly cases, if not now, then in history, that there is someone really lost, even though they are between a lot of people. They are not getting any help, no new ideas. They are on their own, despite having someone else next to them. What about them? Should they find you?
Well, let me first to say, should they find me, I've made lots of mistakes. And I've had to get up and just keep going. It's all in what's inside of you. But whether they should find me, no, but maybe they should find someone like me. There's someone like you out there who's gone through these. Everyone has gone through this pain, heartache. And you and I both know these type of people, they will try to make it out that they didn't have any problems. They will hide that, my PhD was fine, everything was fine. I did this and I graduated with honors. Okay, good for them. But as you said, most of us don't have a program that we finish that is very easy at the end. So that person who's sitting in the lab and they're just banging their head against the wall. Again, this is my personality, but there's someone who knows about you. People are always talking about, this person's doing this person's doing that. When you sit down at lunch or you are in the corridor, you don't have to say, hi, how are you doing? I need help. But you do have to say, hey, I understand that you're familiar with this topic. Or you can just sit down with someone and just have a general conversation. Maybe that's not your style, maybe you're uncomfortable with it, but you are in this. You chose this profession where you have to talk to people. There's no way out if you're sitting, contemplating why you are not having success. Because you know that you're not having success. You're just sitting there saying, okay, I'm unsuccessful. So what are you going to do about it? You have to reach out. If that person ever wanted to just chat with me, because of my experiences in life, I would put down my notebook and I would say, let's go down and have some coffee. I may not be able to help them what they're doing, but I will be able to guide them to someone. But the whole idea is that it's human. You're human. You should want to help your fellow man. There's no competition here. Of course, later there is when it comes to grants and that sort of thing. But at this basic level, just trying to get things to work, there's nothing wrong with connecting with people. And you never know what happens with that connection. This is something that I think Americans are very, very, very good at it.
Tell me.
When I was at Hopkins, I stumbled into a very fine lab. It was a large lab, lots of talented people. And the laboratory next to us was even a more talented, larger lab. I mean, most of their papers were top quality papers. A few natures thrown in there, maybe a Cell as well. And both labs were working on similar topics. And there was competition between the laboratories. But our laboratory had one piece of the puzzle. I'm sure you've heard stories like this. And the other lab had the other piece, and they decided to collaborate. And there was infighting with ideas, authorship, all sorts of things. But they worked together, and they ended up getting a couple of incredible Nature papers out of this. And I'm sure they didn't really like each other, but they used each other to get the result and put together several nice stories that were accepted fairly readily. And I remember I was very young at the time. I had only been in the field for maybe 2 years at the time. And I had this idea that how did they connect if they were at odds all the time, but they knew they were trying to get down to a certain point. So I think for a person who is struggling, you don't want to give up with all the blood, sweat, and tears you've already put into it. But connecting with someone, and again, you don't have to be their best friend. That's the whole point of this. Maybe that will develop. Maybe you will find out you don't like them, but you will get something from them. Get that from them. There's nothing wrong with getting that. Sure, some people will say, oh, I'm being fake because I had to get this from them. But in the end, you've got some results now. And that person who helped you, I guarantee they feel pretty good about actually helping you. So why would you care whether or not you were fake because you had to talk to that person? You still benefited. And this is what life is about. Sometimes you have to get what you need in the most uncomfortable ways, but you have to.
That's where it is.
Yeah, yeah. I like that.
I was wondering when you were describing the two groups, that they were fighting or there were some problems, but they still did a really great piece of work. Do you think they approach science as something that is bigger than they?
Yes.
Bigger than them?
Yeah, these. And again, I learned this. I was very young at that time, and at that time I just thought it was technically you just did everything right, but they knew there were big obstacles to what they were doing. And I think that was part of the argument in the laboratory, because sometimes people see it one way and they think they can manipulate it to get this result, and the other person says, well, we don't want to manipulate it. And I mean, from what I understood, there was intense conversations on a daily basis. So yeah, they definitely understood that what they were doing, and not only that it was bigger than they were, but they were trying to demonstrate that what they were working with fit in to how nature really worked. That's got to be scary. I mean, you're saying that we know it all, even though we're flawed. And you have difference of opinions on how to handle that. And I will never forget that experience, because that was my first experience being around these type of people. I don't consider myself in the same class of these people, because these people, I mean, they were highly competitive, but they had to be humble at some time and listen to someone else's opinion. But they were going to send us, and they did. And again, there were several papers that came out of it. And they were all top journals. So, yeah, they understood. They definitely understood.
Just
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that because as I said at the beginning,
The pleasure was mine.
you have perfect view at people and things, because you have a lot of experiments, you've seen it here, you've seen it in US, and you notice things. So, because today is probably the last day I'm here, so you are the last person I think. I want to thank you from my personal perspective, because I think they'll be much lonelier here without you.